Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And in today's episode, we're going to be breaking down Louisville versus Notre Dame. Louisville is right now ranked number 15 in the country versus number 16 Notre Dame. And for me, this is definitely an intriguing matchup for a number of reasons. This calls back to a matchup that they did last year, which Louisville won 33-20 versus Notre Dame. I think this is definitely one of those games where it's going to speak to the direction that they're going in for the rest of the season. Because to me, I would argue that both these teams really do need this win badly, especially Notre Dame has so far looked pretty solid against Miami, Ohio defensively. I mean, they always look strong defensively, but you still have those questions on offense. Whereas Louisville, they're always, at least for the first 8-9 games of the year, they're always starting off strong in contention for the ACC, and they kind of lose their way towards the end of the season, having usually one really bad loss within the ACC, and then they ultimately get overshadowed or overlooked by a Florida State or a Clemson or one of those two. But when I look at this game, I mean, I've said to myself, I have not watched enough Louisville football as much as I would like to, but in preparation for the segment, I did go back and watch a little bit of their games and really get a flavor for kind of their identity, who they are as a program, what I see on the screen, and most importantly, what I would anticipate seeing them do against definitely one of the biggest game that they have up to this point. And I remember seeing Tyler show. Obviously he started his career at Oregon. He didn't really get much time because he got pretty much was the second string guy over Justin Herbert and Dylan Gabriel, and then so he transferred to Texas Tech under then coach Matt Wells, and he really kind of found his rhythm there in that sort of spread air raid offense where he's proven to be a very serviceable quarterback. I wouldn't sit there and call him elite, but I will say he's an above average quarterback who I think is someone who is reliable, is trustworthy. I think he does a great job of making his receivers look better than look look good. He puts the balls in spots that only his players can get them. He is sixth in the country right now in passing efficiency. And he also had no interceptions either, which I think speaks volumes to the direction that we're seeing in college football in general, where experience is definitely being more valued compared to sort of the true freshman who looks great coming out of high school. I think seeing Tyler show in there is just another example of how much the game is valuing experience over perhaps what you see on film as well. But the one thing that I've been seeing over and over again, and the talk of just in general, is just how explosive this offense is, how exciting they are to watch too. Especially, I mean, Louisville's not the sexiest program in the entire country. I mean, that's not easy to recruit there, given primarily the cream of the crop recruits are not necessarily in that area too, and you are competing against a formidable Kentucky school. You can recruit in the likes of West Virginia. You probably have to go up north to Pennsylvania and to New Jersey, Maryland, that sort of area too. I mean, you can also go a little bit west and try to go towards Ohio and Michigan over there too. But when you think about all those Big Ten schools too, you're probably not going to want to compete with them as much too. And we know about this with Louisville. Their strength is the offensive side of the ball. They're well coached, they're disciplined, they play with heart, with soul, with grit, and they really, quite frankly, have not gotten enough recognition. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here, 2 months from now, talking about an ACC championship between Clemson and Louisville. But I think after what we saw versus Miami, I think there are some flaws in their game that can definitely be exploited. And when I sit here and I look for the keys that Louisville is going to have in order for them to win this game, which I think they are going to win this game. But outside of the explosiveness that I talked about with Tyler Show and all that, I think the other biggest key to this game is I talked about Notre Dame a couple weeks ago too, so I'm not going to talk about them as extensively. But if I'm Louisville and I'm Coach Brom and I'm thinking about I have the offensive side taken care of, but I think you really just have to make sure they're playing an honest game and just making Riley Leonard look even more uncomfortable than he already has in the past couple weeks here. I mean, it's evident that last year at Duke, he had an ankle issue. Now he's dealing with what appears to be a shoulder issue. And, he hasn't looked, he's looked relatively uncomfortable all year. I mean, I've talked about Riley Leonard a lot on this show. He has a high football IQ. He, he plays with poise. He's not afraid to take hits. He's not afraid. He's the type of player where, he puts the team on his back and he does whatever it takes to win. And they're all great intangibles that I think can translate a lot to the NFL. But the one thing that you just have to keep in mind outside of that is he's playing behind a incredibly inexperienced offensive line right now, which I think is showing a lot more than people realize. I mean, obviously they had a great game versus Purdue a couple weeks ago, which is great. But when you play against teams like Northern Illinois and Miami, Ohio, and you're seeing those same sort of issues over and over again, particularly on the offensive line front, it definitely leaves you a little bit concerned into to what extent can Notre Dame really can they recover from that Northern Illinois loss, which again it is a huge upset and everything, and it still is possible if a couple of different things go their way, but at the same time it's just it at the moment it just seems like it's too much to overcome too, because right now, I have not seen a game where Riley Leonard has taken over the game, being able to throw downfield. I think at this point in time, he's just simply not a threat going downfield, and I question what kind of weapons that Notre Dame has to really be able to take that to the next level too. Because if they do end up making the playoff and they do go up against an Ole Miss or a Tennessee or something like that, they're going to get creamed because their offense is not going to be able to keep up to. Even though I said this before, I think Notre Dame is the heart and soul of that team is that secondary and that defense. I mean they are a bend but don't break type of team. I've said this before, even though Marcus Freeman, is constantly getting upsetted year after year between the loss to Marshall in 2022, you had Stanford in 2023, and now Northern Illinois 2024. I think although those things get highlighted consistently, what I will say again is I'm going to double down on this that hiring Marcus Freeman, calling him up was the right thing to do at the time. It still is the right thing to do. And he's a phenomenal recruiter as well. He knows how to sell the Notre Dame program. He knows how to sell the tradition of it. And he knows how to maximize the players that he has on the field because he doesn't have the flexibility of, for example, having a conference championship game where, he says, oh, if you lose one or two games early, it's not the end of the world because as long as you're within the top two, you're more than likely can play. They don't have that flexibility as an independent, but at the same time, that's the double whammy is okay. You have the flexibility of being an independent team, be able to negotiate, big licensing deals with the NBC and Peacock, but on the same turn, essentially, you know, if you're, if you're down in South Bend, the expectation every single year is if you're not going undefeated or if you're not going 12-0 or 11-1, then it's more of just same for the course. I mean, that's exactly why Brian Kelly left Notre Dame for LSU because he knew that he wasn't going to win a national championship at Notre Dame. And do I think Marcus Freeman still can? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's young enough. He's poised enough. He comes off as a great spokesman for the program. But I think if Notre Dame really wants to move forward into being that sort of national championship sort of contender, I mean they have to clean up that offense. I think he has to bring somebody in who can, kind of like what Sharon Moore did, bringing in Wink Martindale. He has to bring in that sort of equivalent where he can just purely focus on maximizing the recruiting as much as he can. Because at the same time, you are competing with a lot of the teams in the Big Ten, but also because they have a scheduling agreement with the ACC. At this point, we pretty much treat Notre Dame's ACC games as pretty much their conference games at this point. I mean, it's de facto, it's not legit, but at this point, we really pretty much treat him as a member of the ACC. So with that said, I have a lot of trouble, with the notion that Notre Dame could win this game. I think we're going to see more of the same with Louisville, winning pretty comfortably. They won 33-20 last year. And when you think about how explosive their offense is, Tyler Show has shown to be efficient and has done enough to win games. Yes, he's had some some issues, particularly with his collarbone and his shoulder. So yes, he's well above average quarterback, but he has shown some injury issues. So I do think if they can really eliminate him having that sort of safety net of him being able to run the ball, which I don't see much of it because they have not been averaging many rushing yards this season. But I think if they can really take advantage of the home field advantage that you have, I think is number one. I think number two, can you put Riley Leonard in a situation where you're not asking him to do too much, where you're asking him to make quick reads, screen plays, throws out to the flat, quick reads, not overly complicated. And I think most importantly, can you ask your defense to win you this game? Can you ask that really strong secondary to be able to to get some early momentum in the first half by a fumble, an interception, something like that to really spark this Notre Dame team to put them in the right direction. And with that said, I think if Notre Dame really has any chance of winning this game, then they are going to have to have some sort of equivalent of that sort of spark where Tyler Show throws an early interception or something like that. But if you ask me, this Louisville team has too many weapons to not win this game, and I expect more of the same from Louisville.